Hello, I hope all is well. My name is Dylan Edelstein, and I am going to start with my learning objective one. With this learning objective one, I have chosen to com create an exercise program for an individual who I conducted an FMS test for. Um, you may have some questions as to what an FMS test is. We will dive into that, not too deeply, because I don't want to give away what my learning objective 2 is or what it's all about, because that's my FMS project. Um, but it'll give you a better understanding, and I'll go through all the exercises that I put together for my client, as well as yes, flexibility exercises, resistance exercises, and cardio exercises. So to begin, as you can see, this picture displays the functional movement screen definition. Uh, it basically defines a functional movement screen as a screening tool used to evaluate 7 functional movement patterns in an individual with no current pain, complaint, or musculoskeletal injury. I didn't want to dive too deep into the FMS, but basically at Hackensack UMC where I interned, they use the FMS as basically the center of attention. Whenever a client or a potential client comes in and they're interested in joining the gym or buying sessions from a trainer, the trainer assesses an FMS, and that will determine whether or not their potential client has certain immobilities that they'll need to attack. That way, that person can improve on those difficulties within his or her physical ability. So, with that being said, the person I did the FMS test for or on, he lacked hip mobility. He definitely had issues with his hip flexibility and obviously, like I said, his hip mobility. And I put together a collection of flexibility, resistance, and cardio exercises that will hopefully strengthen his hips, his hip flexors, etc. The first flexibility exercise I had my client doing was the lunge with spinal twist. And as you see, this individual lunges with each foot, one with her left, one with her right. Then she reaches with her right hand, opposite hand to opposite foot, and then turns to the knee in which she is reaching or lunging with, and then turns towards her knee and reaches to the sky. This gives a good stretch for your hip flexors. For this next flexibility exercise, this is the knee to chest in the supine position. As you can see, this individual squeezes his glutes and pulls his knee to his chest. He remembers to breathe and squeeze his core, and then he slowly lets down his legs back down to the platform. It's important to remember that you use both your arms to pull your knees to your chest. This not only gives a good hamstring stretch, but it also stretches your hips, and it's good for your lower back as well. Into our third flexibility exercise, this is a lunging hip flexor stretch. As you notice, this female here, she lunges slightly larger than a 90-degree angle with her front leg, and she's in full extension with her back leg, trying to get a good hip flexor stretch. And then she holds for about a 10-second to 15-second count, and then once this goes up, she switches both legs, and she does that about 3 times each. But she's going into a slight bigger bend than 90 degrees on both legs, trying to get a good deep hip flexor stretch. It's important to get good hip flexor stretches if you have tight hips. Going into our last flexibility stretch, we have the simple sitting butterfly. A lot of people know this simple flexibility exercise. You simply put your feet together, as you can see this woman doing, and she puts her hands on her ankles. You can either push down on your knees with your elbows. It's important to keep your chest and core tight and an upright posture, and you're trying to get a good stretch within your groins as well as your hip flexors. All I'm trying to do here with my client who I tested is to get his hips loose and flexible. That way when we dive into our resistance training exercises, he's ready to go. and there's no risk at pulling muscles or endangering himself. Here is our first resistance training exercise. This female trainer here is explaining the hip abduction machine. I will explain the exercise itself. You simply put your knees in almost to the point where they're straight and vertically aligned, and then you push out to its most outward position without hyperextending, and you set the weight at a comfortable position where you're not trying to overload or do too much. This works on your hip flexors as well as it could work on your glutes too. Into the next exercise is the hip adduction. So it's very similar to the hip abduction, except you're doing the inverse movement. Now she aligns her feet on the foot pads as she explains, and then now you're simply lining up your knees in the most outer position and driving your knees into the ground, or heels into the ground, and then driving your knees together. And you're setting up the weight to a very similar amount, and you just keep driving inwards. The next exercise is very simple. It's a basic leg squat or leg press. You basically want to line your knees up to less than a 90-degree angle, so it could be like a 75, 80, and you just push away from the floor. Now, it's important to remember that you keep your chest up tight, you breathe, hands to your side, and you don't hyperextend or lock your knees at full extension. This is very good for your legs and hip muscles. It will definitely strengthen your legs and build stamina within your core. I feel this is a very good exercise for somebody who lacks hip mobility and leg stamina. Into our next resistance training exercise, we're doing a simple squat with lateral leg lift, utilizing the therapeutical band. I love utilizing therapeutical bands as well as Hackensack UMC because it's a simple exercise, or it can be a simple exercise with a therapeutical band. It's easy to own at home. But in this exercise, you can see this female trainer goes into a deep squat and simply lifts each leg laterally to her side, and it's firing her hip flexors. She keeps her hands out in front. The one thing I don't agree with is her chest comes forward in her squat, but that can be easily fixed. This is a very, very good exercise, and all therapeutical bands come at different intensities. So utilizing therapeutical bands is not only easy, but you can increase intensities at any time you want. Transitioning into our next resistance exercise is another exercise that involves a therapeutical band. This is the lateral band walk. This can be done anywhere pretty much. You just simply put the band on your ankles or on the bottom of your feet, as this gentleman has it, and you simply walk side to side almost in a shuffling position, and you can do this 10 or 15 times in both directions. You can do 3 sets, 10 or 15 each side, depending on what your trainer advises you to do. But this is a great exercise, very simple to do anywhere. And lastly, for our resistance exercises is the hip bridge with an alternate leg extension, also involving a therapeutical band. This is a simple firing in the core, raise your midsection or hips, and then simply kick your feet all the way up to the sky, involving resistance within the therapeutical band. As far as this workout program goes, it's always important to end with a little bit of cardio. Here, I find that box jumps are important for someone who lacks hip mobility. This video simply explains the form of a box jump. It's very basic, very simple. Anybody can do it. If you want to maximize the output or the effort, you can involve the person jumping with dumbbells or weighted plates. It makes it a little bit more challenging, but it involves them exploding from the ground up and utilizing their hips, their core, and basically all their lower half. And to conclude the exercise, you could also have them go on the exercise bike or the cycle for 10 to 15 minutes just to get their cardiorespiratory fitness in. That's very important.